Hello and welcome. Iran's missile strikes on Israel have brought Iran and Israel closer to the prospect of an all-out regional war in the Middle East than at any point in time over the past 1 year. Countries like the United States, China and India have been advising restraint, but this seems to be having little impact on Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Forces. Joining me now on the news track, live and exclusive from Boston, is a special guest. Allow me to introduce Professor Vali Nasar. Professor Nasar is arguably the world's most renowned expert on Middle East politics and US foreign policy. He specializes in the affairs of his home country, Iran. Professor Nasar is at present a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. His expertise has informed policymakers for decades, from the Obama administration to present-day discussions on Iran's nuclear strategy and regional ambitions. Nasar is the author of several important books, including The Shia Revival and Forces of Fortune, which have shed light on the way sectarianism, geopolitics and economics intersect in shaping the model Middle East. I heard Professor Nasar at the World Economic Forum, and I am delighted that he's taken out time to join us on India Today at a time when the world's eyes are on Iran, Israel, and no one really knows what to expect next. Professor Nasar, welcome to India Today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to this program.
Can you begin by explaining to everyone watching you in India and elsewhere what you think is Israel's most likely response to Iran firing more than 200 missiles towards Israeli territory?
That is difficult to say. I think this is not a simple answer for either Israelis or the United States. They have to calibrate what do they expect an Iranian counter-reaction would be. I think the United States is perhaps advising Israel to retaliate in a manner that does not provoke a further retaliation from Iran. And at the same time, also, Israel is busy with wars in both Gaza and Lebanon right now. And although it wants to retaliate against Iran for the missile attack, it does not want to open a third front with Iran at the same time. And so I think that that's why it's taken them a while, that they will have to calibrate and find a way in which that they would give a response that looks sufficiently strong, targeted, but does not provoke an immediate wider war at this stage.
What was the signaling in the missile strikes that Iran directed towards Israel? Given the fact that there were some military targets that were picked, but Israel is claiming success that their missile shields were able to ward off most of the missiles that were coming in. Where does the reality lie? Iran claims we attacked the hangars, we attacked where the F-35 fighter jets were stationed. It's a big success. Israel says no one was killed, nothing really happened.
Well, I think nobody has seen footage of those air bases, so we really don't know. But I think Iran's point was not to kill Israelis, because they also don't want to provoke a larger war. Their point was to say they have the will and the capability to hit Israel. That is important because in the Muslim world, and particularly in the Arab world, it positions Iran as the only country that has the audacity to take Israel on. So it gives them legitimacy, particularly after the death of Hassan Nasrallah. Secondly, I think Iran's aim is to say that enough of its missiles can get through the Iron Dome for Israelis to worry. And I think the target audience here is not the Israeli military, is the Israeli people, who previously thought that the Iron Dome provided 100% protection, but now would have to think that out of 200 missiles, I don't know what the number, but let's say 10% got through, hit their targets, and one of them actually landed in Tel Aviv, not far from the Mossad headquarters, and that if things escalate, that there would be casualties. Yes, not all of the Iranian missiles would get through, but that's not the point, because this was a warning shot, if you would, by Iran. And yes, the Iron Dome works. The Jordanians also shut down some of the missiles, but at the same time, the Iron Dome did not perform 100%. And so I think, you know, the Israelis can claim success, but also I think the Iranians can claim that they got their point through. that they have the will and the ability. That's what they wanted to put forward, not how many people they kill.
In your estimate, are we heading towards a larger military escalation between Israel and Iran? And if, God forbid, there is actually a higher military escalation between these two countries, how is that likely to play out militarily?
I think the two are now heading towards some kind of military confrontation, maybe not immediately, but not in the very long future. They now have emerged, if you would, as the two main great power rivals in the region. The rest of the region is basically bystanders right now. In the most important wars of the region, which is in Gaza and Lebanon right now, these are the two protagonists. And they are also increasingly confronting one another directly. They may not be ready for an all-out war, but unless things change in the Middle East drastically and the United States is able to redirect the region towards de-escalation, starting with Gaza, that then we're heading somewhere very bad. But at the same time, Israel has tremendous amount of missile and air capability. But given its size and the number of soldiers it has and its current security situation, it's not capable of invading Iran. And at any rate, these two countries don't have borders with each other. So the way in which this war would unfold is with missiles, sabotage, bombing from a distance, cyber attacks. But it ultimately will involve the United States. Because the United States is in the region. It has said that it would defend Israel if it comes under attack. It has stepped up to intercede Iranian missiles as well as Hezbollah missiles in the past. And ultimately, at some level of the war, it may engage Iran directly. And then the war will spread to places like Iraq and the Red Sea elsewhere. And I have to say that the Persian Gulf monarchies, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, are in great danger because not that they will be party to this war, but that the war will be fought in an arena where which could threaten the economic models that they are pursuing. The idea of a corridor from India to the Mediterranean does not really work if it's going through a war zone between the United States and Iran. And largely the idea of Gulf stability, the rise of the Gulf, its tourism, industries, etc., has been backed on a relative peace that we've seen there, which actually has come as a consequence of normalization of relations between UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. So a war with Israel threatens all of that. The Gulf economies cannot be bystanders to a war, even if their governments don't participate in it. And one reason for that is that a lot of American military bases are stationed in Gulf countries. And so I don't see a scenario in which that the U.S. would carry out bombing of Iran, for instance, without the bases from which those airplanes came become targets, or the economies where they are hosting those become targets. Already, Iran targeted air bases in Israel that it said were responsible for carrying out the bombing that killed Hassan Nasrallah. So the same kind of a model in the Gulf would mean Qatar, UAE, Kuwait, Oman, all of these countries could be targets or at least arenas in which things have, that the war would unfold. So that's a worst case scenario, that the war between Iran and Israel will quickly decimate, if you would, the current stability in the Gulf, in Iraq, elsewhere in the region, that on the back of which the economies are built. And then finally, I would say, as this escalates, we talk about where the Arab governments stand, but the Arab people are increasingly more and more on the side of Iran, Hezbollah, and particularly on the side of the Palestinians. And that reality at some point in time may explode in the open as well. We're seeing demonstrations, anger, etc. But at some point in time, that would also become material.
A lot is being said about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wanting to use this opportunity to take out Iran's nuclear facilities. How likely is that scenario, that the IDF uses these Iranian missile attacks to go and attack Iran's nuclear facilities?
It is not realistic. Iran's nuclear facilities are not like the Ozerok nuclear power plant of Iraq in 1980s, which is sitting above the ground, an easy target. They can hit some sites, but they will not destroy them. And once they do that, then essentially the United States would have to get in the war. And then we are in the scenario that you mentioned. So Israel is in a position to start a war between the United States and Iran, and itself and Iran. But Israel is not in a position to finish the war. Israel is in a position to attack Iran's nuclear facilities, but it's not in a position to destroy Iran's nuclear program. In fact, if such an attack happened, the consequence would be that Iran would take its program deep underground in its mountain ranges in a way that bunker buster bombs cannot destroy them. It would spread them far and wide, farther to the east, and then it would probably come out of the non-proliferation treaty and openly declare itself a nuclear state. So any attack on what is currently, at least officially, seen as civilian nuclear program that Iran holds up for negotiation with the United States, any attack on it would then convert this to a weapons program right away. So the surest way to turn Iran from this ambiguous place it is into an outright nuclear state is to attack this. And then once Iran becomes nuclear, then you have to say Turkey, Saudi Arabia, UAE, the whole region will become nuclear. And that is a non-proliferation nightmare, which above all will threaten Israel. Israel right now is sitting in the middle of a region that is in disagreement with it over its policies in Lebanon and in Gaza and in the West Bank. Even those countries with which it has good relations are opposed to its policies. Does Israel really want to see several Arab countries and Turkey also being nuclear? So it's not a course, it's a course of satisfaction in the short run, but in the longer run, it's a strategic mistake by Israel to push Iran in that direction.
Some Israeli politicians have spoken of how this is a ripe moment to push change, that if Israel makes the right moves because of internal protests and dissent amongst the people in Iran, that this is when they can force regime change. Now, you understand the internal affairs of Iran better than most, and therefore, what's your assessment on this question of whether, because of internal dissent, can Iran be pushed towards a change in regime?
I think that's a very simplistic reading of it, and among the many scenarios of what might happen in Iran, is taking the absolute best one that you can see. I mean, first of all, even those who are opposed to the regime in Iran are not necessarily supporters of Israel. And it's not a given that when they protest at their own government, when their government comes under threat, that they're not, some of them at least, are not going to rally to the flag. So the idea to think of the population of another country as being willing to betray their own government in a moment of war and side with an aggressor, one who they are critical of by and large for his policies in Gaza and Lebanon and don't view as a friend, is largely wishful thinking. And then you have to say that even if the regime in Iran fell, I mean, we saw the United States think like this in 2003. You're assuming that immediately a pro-Western, stable, democratic government is going to come to power, is going to be friends with Israel and America, and is going to basically toe the line. That may very well not be the case. There are many, many other scenarios of the kind that we've seen happen in Lebanon, in Iraq, etc., that would produce much worse nightmares and scenarios. I mean, Israel itself went into Lebanon in 1982 to destroy the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and it ended up creating Hezbollah, a far greater threat to it. And right now, even in Lebanon, it's not in a position, beyond killing Nasrallah and downgrading Hezbollah, to produce anything positive in Lebanon. The United States did the same thing in Iraq. So this is very facile thinking. This is more, I think, public relations thinking that is serious strategic consideration.
You said that Israel can push Iran and the United States into war. God forbid if that were to happen, what's your reading of Iran's military capabilities at this moment, given its economic turmoil and economic sanctions, and how is that war likely to proceed, and would that potentially ultimately involve China and Russia as well?
No, it will not involve China. China does not have a military presence in the region. And Russia, yes, it has capability to support Iran's military, although it's involved in a war on its own. I mean, a war, again, as we're seeing in Ukraine, can go in many directions. I mean, Iran is not going to fight the United States with tanks or the way Saddam Hussein did. It's not going to fight it in a conventional military war. It may hit American targets with missiles, etc. But ultimately, the United States has to consider that it will have to invade Iran. It would have to do what it did in Iraq, in a country that is orders of magnitude larger than Iraq. Its capital city is 2,000 kilometers and 2 mountain ranges away from the nearest port. That if the United States could fail in Iraq, does it really think it's going to succeed in Iran? If it cost it trillions of dollars and so much casualties in a way that it actually impacted its domestic politics, and yet wasn't able to deliver anything in Iraq. If you look at Libya, if you look at these much smaller, easier countries, and military invasion has been a failure and created bigger headaches, what would make the United States think that it would militarily succeed in Iran? I mean, hitting Iran to punish it is one thing, but a war, how many American troops would it take to actually invade Iran and occupy Iran? And then the assumption is that the Iranians won't fight in a guerrilla war in a way in which the Iraqis fought. So, you know, once you start talking this language that we're going to go to war, we're going to change things in Iran, yes, it's very easy to say that the Iranian regime is a problem, it's a threat, and you want to get rid of it. But serious people would have to think through multiple steps. And what is your exit strategy? How does this end? None of it looks good with Iran. That's exactly why the United States is not eager on what Israel is actually advocating. Israel may want a military solution to Iran, but it seems to me that the United States is not buying into that right now.